Hi everyone, welcome to SGTV. This is part of our Job Routes for Electricians mini-series, and today we're going to be talking about being a domestic electrician. So today we are joined by Stephanie Ward, who has been on the show before. So Stephanie, it's good to have you back once again. So how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah,
Good
to be back.
So as we said on other episodes in the mini-series, the whole point of doing this mini-series for Job Routes is just to make anyone thinking about getting into the industry or who's already in the industry just aware of the various routes you can take. So we've got episodes on being a domestic installer, commercial, rail, agricultural, tutor, everything, everything we can possibly think of, just so you've got an idea of what you can do. So Stephanie, you are a domestic installer.
I am, yes.
You are. So let's just talk about sort of your path on. I know we've had you on the show before and we spoke about sort of how you got into the industry, but for those who haven't seen that episode, how did you sort of get to where you are now?
So initially I just did a little bit of hands-on experience, just a few days a week, my father-in-law. And then I started college. So I did night school for 2 days a week. I did that throughout my level 2 and my level 3 diploma. After that, I then did a short course to get my regs. So at the time it was the 17th edition. And then after that, the summer that ended, I then did my EAL test and inspection, and then I think it's periodic inspection or initial verification, I think the actual qualification is. So, and then I got those two. And then I did start my MVQ, but haven't finished it. Because technically you don't need it to be a domestic installer, but I have got my AM2 qualification as well.
So do you think you'll go back in and finish your MVQ at any point, or?
Probably not. I don't need it, and unless I did ever need it for any reason, I'd probably do it like a short way rather than doing it the full MVQ.
Yeah. So this is a question for our audience actually, because I don't know the answer to this. I know in some courses for MVQs or different BTECs or whatever they are, you can sometimes, if you haven't finished a course, you've still built up UCAS points or certain points, and sometimes you can transfer them over and pick them up at different colleges or whatever. So if anyone knows the answer to that, if you can do that, please let us know, because I've been spouting on it a couple of times. So, but it's always an option, isn't it? So what is a domestic installer? What does that look like for you?
So for me, I am housing association. So general day-to-day, it's repairs, the odd board change, sometimes rewires. So it's quite varied. But generally it's just like socket changes, light switch changes, pendant changes. It's just little jobs like that day to day.
Yeah. What drew you to domestic and not other routes?
I think because my father-in-law is a domestic installer, it's just something that I've always done. You speak to other sparkies out there and they hate working in tenanted properties and when they're occupied and there's stuff everywhere and it's an absolute nightmare. But you just find ways around it. Whereas I know some people just like a shell of a building and they're happiest because nothing's in their way.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm repeating myself from a previous episode, but again, this is the beauty of this industry. Some people love aspects of it. Some people hate certain aspects of it. Some people love EICR. Some people hate them. But that's a good thing about it. And you're doing social properties, and you enjoy it, and that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's also the people you meet along the way as well. That like some of the tenants are absolutely lovely. And you just like, I'm quite a sociable person. Like I like a good chat. So it is nice to speak to the tenants as well. Whereas sometimes when I'm working on my own, I get a bit lonely.
Do you think it has to do with sort of the type of person you are? Do you think certain people would be drawn to the empty building where they can crack on, head down, not speak to anyone? But if you're a sociable person, this might be a good route for you to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm from a customer service retail background, so it's always been with me to offer a service like that. So yeah, I think it does depend completely on the person you are. Like some people enjoy being on their own, just cracking on. But like myself, I'm happy to work in occupied properties with nice elderly tenants that have stories to tell and just are lovely, I guess.
Yeah. Could you tell us a bit about, for those who don't know, I mean, experienced electricians are going to know the voltages, the circuits, all this kind of thing. But could you just give us a sort of basic gist for those who are thinking about getting into the industry? The sort of the main difference in sort of wiring that you do compared to someone who may be doing, you know, big three phase stuff. What sort of, how does it go for you? What's the gist of it?
So I only deal with single phase. So you've just got obviously one phase coming into a property. You're only going to look at about, well, I only deal with like 230 volts, so low voltage. And then obviously your general ampage that you're installing. So the most I'll do is like a 40 amp breaker, for example. So for a shower, but generally, yeah, you don't get more than that because you don't need to, it's not required. But yeah.
Yeah. And you're doing board changes, all that kind of thing. Is that quite an enjoyable aspect of it, or can that be quite stressful?
I love a board change.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even my bosses joke that, you wanted to do that board change, didn't you, Steph? You're just doing it for the sake of it. But yeah, no, I absolutely love a board change. But I think one of my favorite jobs is board change and then test, and then when you're commissioning it, I think, yeah, it's just satisfying.
Is that purely, it's just the satisfaction of getting it done?
I think so, yeah. Just especially like looking at it and seeing you've done a neat job, and it's easy for the next spark to come in and test it. And I think that's the important thing as well, because sometimes you take the lid off a board and it's like spaghetti junction, and you're like, really? Like I did in the ICR the other day, and I ended up disconnecting every single circuit and re-terminating because it looked that bad.
Well, that's good though. You've got the knowledge and confidence to do that. And when you're working in people's homes, you know, it goes without saying, they're living in these homes. It's got to be safe. So having that knowledge and confidence to do that, ensuring that tenant or that homeowner is safe is an important thing.
Yeah. Also, our company is very hot on us being safe as well, which is good. We have like devices, like man down devices, so we have to keep those on us at all times, check in and everything like that. So there is a domestic aspect of are you safe in every situation, but I think as long as you take the precautions, there's no issues.
Do you think your days are quite varied? You're not doing the same thing day in, day out?
No, I could be ripping heaters off the wall, installing electric radiators one day, or just doing a board change another day, or just literally changing accessories the next day, and then maybe a test. So every day is different in the line of work that I do.
Yeah, actually, I want to touch on that about electric radiators and heating in general, because there's a sort of shift going, and I know from different people on YouTube, for example, they're against hot air pumps, heat source pumps, those kind of things. But it is sort of going into the electric side of thing rather than the plumbing side of thing. So is that something you're seeing more of?
So I didn't realize how many properties that we own that are purely electric. We have about 30 something flats in Bedworth that is obviously, Bedworth isn't a rural place at all, but they're all air source heat pumps.
You pronounced it wrong, by the way. It's Bedworth. If you're from Bedworth, they pronounce it Bedworth.
I do apologise.
No, you are right. It's Bedworth, but I know a lot of people from Bedworth, they pronounce it Bedworth. So.
Yeah, so they're all air source heat pumps in there as well, it's a relatively new building in the grand schemes of architecture. So yeah, I was quite surprised about that, because I didn't realise that until I started working there the other day. Because normally you see it in rural areas more so. But I do find if I've got a void and there are storage heaters, I will rip them out and I will put electric radiators in and just change the supply to 24-hour supply and just get rid of the off-peak completely. So yeah, a lot of customers say it's cheaper to do that as well, because they say their storage heaters actually cost quite a lot of money to run and heat up overnight.
Yeah, and the problem is you've not got instant hot water unless you've put in timing switches and things like that. If you're just working on your main switch for it, you've got to wait 45 minutes, an hour before you can have a... Yeah,
so we tend to put time clocks in. So obviously then you can control it yourself anyway, because you just put your timer on for whatever time you want, and then you can boost it if you do run out, or you've got more you've got more what's the word, control over it.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
definitely got more control over it. So I think it is better. Otherwise, you've got to, like you say, if you've got a full tank and you've only got the one off-peak supply, then once it's gone, it's gone.
So do you think it's quite an exciting time to be a domestic installer? Because not only are you doing your sort of bread and butter work, which is satisfying and enjoyable in its own right, like your board changes, your face plates, that kind of thing, but you're also seeing a lot of more things, such as these heating systems, solar panels, EV charging points, almost going to the point where people are wanting a bit more control and self-sufficiency over their energy usage. I think that's sort of bringing a completely different element to domestic installers.
Yeah, I think so. I don't really delve too much into like sort of solar, but I do come across the odd property. I know that the company I work for do try and install them where they can on like newer estates. I would like to know a bit more about them. I would probably need to know a bit more about them. Obviously, my knowledge is minimal from college, but I think people are wanting more of that energy efficiency, doing their bit for global warming and trying to do their part. I think, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So do you think there's going to be maybe a bigger demand for domestic installers going forward with this kind of shift in technology?
Yeah, potentially. I think there's a huge demand for us anyway, but it depends whether obviously you specialise in that or not, I think. But obviously if you've got a customer, they know you, they often want you to do all of the electrical work rather than just dabble in a bit of domestic, but they'll want you to do everything, I find.
Yeah. Do you think that's another good point about being a domestic installer? You're seeing face to face your customer, whether you're employed by a company or if you're a self-employed person, you're face to face with that customer. Do you think that helps retain that customer? So you've always got business.
Yes, so the majority of the work that comes in is from the same people. So you do see people on a regular basis because they're happy to report issues. And then you might go to a property that you've not seen before and you're going for a separate issue when actually there's further issues and code ones around that you have to rectify when you're there as well. So it does vary, but yeah, you do see the same people. And I think you do build up that rapport with them as well. And a lot of them like the fact that you're a woman.
Yeah. Okay. What about the issues? What sort of issues, problems, errors, that kind of thing? What sort of things are you rectifying?
Most common is probably just thermostats going on hot water tanks, generally on a day-to-day basis, or sockets aren't working properly, or because normally they seize, so obviously you can't switch them on or off, or you can't get a plug in properly, or pendants are broken. Bathroom lights is a big one as well, because when the 2D lamps goes in them, then to be honest, I just change them for LED now. Yeah. I don't even replace the lamp. Just change them because it saves me going out to a future call out, so it actually saves some money.
Have there been any instances where you've come into a property and you've realised this is dangerous, there's something really potentially fatal here, and you've had to sort of rectify that?
So we had one the other week, and it just become void, and basically they drilled through to the back of the cutout and zip tied a 2.5 2-core cable onto the main incomer cable and just taken it to a connector block. And yeah, that was just, so they were nicking electric basically. But there was no earth to it, nothing. And it was just, that was probably the most dangerous situation I've ever seen. But I went in and there was like pendants ripped off the ceiling. There was switches knocked off. It was just absolutely horrendous.
I wonder how some of these places end up in states like that.
I don't know. Honestly, don't know.
Is the majority of your work indoors, or do you get some outdoor? Is it good balance?
To be fair, majority, I'd say 98% of it is inside. You get the odd floodlight outside, or the odd bulkhead outside, but generally no, it is inside.
Is that nice though? I mean, we're known for our winters in the UK, so I'd imagine most people would want to be working indoors in those situations.
Yeah, although the state of some of these properties, sometimes you do want to be outside, but no, generally, yeah, no, inside is, I feel safer inside as well.
Yeah. Well, how do you mean?
Just from like, because you don't, some of these areas aren't the greatest. Obviously, when you've got your tools outside and stuff like that, you don't really want to be leaving stuff. And I think it's just easier to be working inside, to be honest.
Yeah. Let's talk about pros and cons of the job. Let's start with the cons. What would be the downside of being a domestic installer, if there are any?
Probably just like having to like climb into small spaces, and sometimes just being a contortionist, because you have got to squeeze yourself into those hard to reach places. Especially with me, I'm 5'1", so I obviously am prime candidate to go into those small spaces.
Steph can fit in there. Yeah, let's send her
fit in there.
Yeah,
we'll send you in there. Although to be fair, my senior electrician is the same height as me, which is great. So he can, but he's got bad knees and a bad back and everything. So it's always me that goes in there anyway. But no, I get volunteered for all of those jobs, and you have to like tuck yourself into like small loft spaces and stuff like that. But
are you as good at me at hitting your head off every single rafter in loft spaces?
See, I don't tend to hit my head. I tend to walk into door handles. That's my clumsiness.
Yeah. Right there on the outside of your arm as you're walking past.
I don't know how many. I must do it at least 4 or 5 times a day.
Yeah.
So bad. But no, I'm quite fortunate. I don't tend to hit my head.
No, it must just be me then. I think every time I go into a loft, I see a rafter, remember it's there, forget it's there, headbutt the rafter, scream and shout and swear and all sorts. So. What about pros of the job? What are the things you enjoy most about being a domestic installer?
I think just the customer satisfaction definitely is key. Just meeting like new people as well, and then like just being like grateful for the work that you've done. I get a massive buzz off people that are happy, I guess. That's a definite pro for me. And then just being able to see your work being done quite quickly, because obviously when you work in potentially commercial or industrial, obviously the process is a lot slower because you're doing it on a bigger scale, whereas obviously with domestic, a smaller scale, things get done quicker. So I think it is just definitely a pro is time and being able to see your progress quite quickly.
You see that transformation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
What about the so your social housing? So I'm guessing you don't deal with homeowners very much. It's mainly tenants.
Yeah.
So can any of those be difficult to deal with?
They can be. Where we are, sometimes there is a bit of a language barrier, but you just try your best to communicate as best you can. That is definitely difficult when you're trying to explain that you can't fix it there and then, and you have to come back. And
so you got tenants from overseas living in the properties.
Yeah, which is it'll be handy if I was bilingual, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So but no, that is definitely a challenge. And obviously just working in where there's obstructions and stuff like that, that's always difficult, but generally no, that I'd say the language barrier is very, very tricky, because obviously you want them to be safe, but trying to get that point across is sometimes difficult.
I suppose explaining to someone that they might not have electric for the next couple of hours can be a sticky one, especially if you don't speak their language.
Yeah, definitely. But luckily I think there are people around, so worst case I can get someone that would be able to translate. Okay. But no, I've managed to just get by. There's either been like one of their children there that can speak English and stuff like that, can translate, or we can get someone on the phone or something like that. So there are ways around it, but it's really like, it's hard for me because obviously I want to try and make sure they're okay, and obviously when there is a little bit of a language barrier, then that can sometimes be difficult.
Yeah, I know a lot of domestic installers, They tell me how they get treated, like the physical treats in domestic places. Here you go, here's a box of eggs from the local farmer, here's some chocolates or some wine. Do you get anything like that?
The odd box of chocolates. When I was working down in Wales, one of my colleagues was working on a farm, and he was like, "Oh, do you want some meat?" And literally, he must have taken about 100 quid's worth of meat from the supermarket
Wow.
for about a tenner.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was proper like Welsh rid, like lamb and everything.
Yeah.
I was so jealous.
Wow, I'm jealous. Yeah. So do you think it's easier for electricians who have completed a college course to step into the domestic sector due to sort of like the practical experiences within college?
So the way that our course was done was so you could get your NIC or your NAPIT scheme, essentially. So
Yeah.
we, as the way we did it, so we did it obviously part-time, level 2, level 3, then your 17th edition, well, obviously now 18th edition, then you're obviously your test and inspection, whether that be City and Guilds or EAL. That was basically the end goal, was then so you could then go straight out self-employed to be a domestic installer with a scheme. That's not how I wanted to do it. I think an apprenticeship would be better still. Especially if you're younger, rather than doing it that like the way that I did it, and then going out on your own, because you still need to gain that experience. Like domestic is a whole nother world. Yeah, you know how to do it on paper, but going out and doing it, especially when it's an occupied property, it's not a blank canvas. I think you still need that experience within the field to then go out. Like I wouldn't be the electrician I was today if I'd gone straight out on my own, because I've worked for a company where I've learned a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
So I still would recommend, if you can to do an apprenticeship.
Would you
I
say,
wish I'd done that straight from school.
would you say the same for, let's say, adult learners, people who are doing a career change?
It
Because
is it is difficult.
there are courses and fast courses, and I know there's a big debate about that, but there are some successful electricians who have done those, and some have come from apprentice backgrounds. So I mean, what would you think?
It scares me when someone says they're on a short course. I think because there's so many aspects to electrical, you can't know things within 6 weeks or whatever some of these courses are, or they spend like 6 weeks in a classroom, 6 weeks in a practical. Like you can't know that. I was at college for 2.5 years. I'd already done a year on site as well as, but a lot of the people that I was at college with had no on-site experience whatsoever. And they were coming out with a ticket to say that they could then essentially be on one of these schemes with the qualifications they've got. But I don't know. I think I think you need that experience with a company before you go out on your own. And yeah, the odd people, yeah, just take to it like that. But that's not everyone. You need that experience with someone else to then be able to be the best spark you can be.
Yeah, and apprentices aren't just for young people as well. I know people who have retrained in their 30s, 40s. They've had to take a pay cut, obviously. They've had to sort of, have a bit of a buffer in the bank account to see them through for a year or two. And they've been an adult apprentice, and they've come out of it not regretting a thing. So it's an option. I don't think age could be a barrier for being an electrician. If you're thinking you've had enough of whatever job you're in, and you like the idea of going into, say, domestic installs, for example, it's still an option. Being an apprentice, it's still an option. You just gotta do it, haven't you?
You just got to do it. The best way to do it is find someone that you're happy to go work with a few days a week with, get that experience alongside doing it. So you either do it like, for example, I did, and I had that on-site experience as well as, you can't just go to college and then come out of college with no on-site. And I think that's key. But obviously the qualifications that some of the people got in my class, they could do that without having done a single bit of on-site, which is not really the right way to go for personally. I think you do need to find that practical element alongside, whether it be 1-2 days a week. You're still getting your hands stuck in, you're just going for it. But the apprenticeship route gives you obviously more on-site experience.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, obviously, you do have to take a wage cut, but it's only for a few years until you're qualified, and then you're going to be earning decent amount of money,
possibly more than you was on in your previous career, depending on what you was doing.
Exactly.
And I think, as we said before as well, just go knock doors, ring people up if you want some experience before you're going into college, or if you need someone, you're looking for apprenticeships and that kind of thing. Just go asking, go knocking on doors, ask people, ring them up. People like face to face. Looking through 20 CVs or emails, it can be difficult to differentiate and sift through the good ones. But if you're seeing people in front of you, you get a good idea of who they are and what they're like. And I think that makes the bigger impression. So that would be my advice. No matter what your age, whether you're a young person or adult learner looking to get into the industry and you need that experience, just ring people up, ask if you can tag along, ask if you can shadow them, watch them, whatever, however you want to do it. There's always an option there, isn't there?
100%. Absolutely agree with you.
So before we finish this episode, what would be your advice to anyone of any age, gender, whatever, anyone thinking about becoming a domestic installer?
Just don't be afraid to take a chance. You've just got to go with it. Like we said before, find that experience, make sure you're absolutely 100% this is what you want to do, and absolutely just take it in your stride and do what you want to do and just go for it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So anyway, that concludes our episode today. So this has been part of our Job Routes for Electricians mini-series with yourself, Stephanie. And it's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see you again soon. And for anyone who's watching this, there is another episode featuring Stephanie on the SGTV channel. It is about being a female sparky in the industry. So that's one to look out for. So anyway, please make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification button below, and we will see you next time.